Hello, I'm Kate Pullinger, and I'm talking to you today from my office, which is I'm lucky enough to have an office at the end of the garden in my house where I live in London in the UK. Though I come from BC, which is where my new book Forest Green is based. Just a few notes of caution. One is that I have been waiting for it to rain because my neighbors are building something massive in their garden, and that has been going on for quite a long time. And I had hoped that a rainy day might mean that they might stop sawing and hammering and etc. However, it has not meant that, and I decided today I'd go ahead with the video anyway, so please do expect some background noise. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is 5 things about writing fiction based on true stories. And I'm going to talk about that through the prism of my new book, Forest Green, and my book from 10 years ago, The Mistress of Nothing, which was fortunate enough to have won the Governor General's Award in 2009. So the 5 things I'm going to talk to you about now are: number 1, no matter what you write, some people will not be happy. Number 2, just because it happened that way doesn't mean it will work in a novel. 3, family members may not make good characters. 4, it can take a long time to get it right. And 5, fiction based on true stories requires as much imagination as any other kind of writing. So, number 1, some people will not be happy. Well, Forest Green hasn't come out yet, but it's loosely based on a bit of family history. So I don't yet know whether or not some people will not be happy with the novel. It's largely based in the 20th century, and it mostly concerns people who now are no longer with us. So who knows? Who knows what will happen with that book? With The Mistress of Nothing, which is not based on family history, but is based on a true story, the story of Lady Lucy Duff Gordon and her maid Sally Naldred. Lucy Duff Gordon has ancestors who are living today in the UK, one of whom is an eminent historian, Anthony Beevor, who you might know from his books of history about the Second World War, Stalingrad, etc. And indeed, when the novel came out, Anthony Beevor was not happy with the way I depicted his descendant, his probably great-great-great-grandmother, Lucy Duff Gordon. And he wrote an article about it in the Guardian. And luckily for me, though, although he did not like the novel and did not like the depiction of Lucy Duff Gordon, he was gracious enough not to focus his disapproval on me and my novel. The piece that he wrote really was about why he doesn't like historical fiction. So that's a whole other kind of debate, and luckily enough for me, as I said, not a personal attack, and also not a debate I felt I wanted to get into with him, an eminent historian. It felt a bit like it would be a bit of an uneven playing field if I tried to disagree with him defending his great-great-granny. That would not have been a good look. However, it turned out that Sally Naldred, the maid, about whom very little is known and who is the main character in my novel, also has descendants. And I indeed had an email exchange from a descendant of hers, a woman who lives in New Zealand, who's a direct descendant of Sally's sister, who's also mentioned briefly in the novel. And I was amazed to discover through my correspondence with her that my kind of conjecture about what might have happened to Sally after Lucy Duff Gordon expelled her from their home was probably true, in that the Naldred family, Sally and Aldrich's sister in particular had run a hotel in Cairo, and they had gone into that that sector catering to tourists that boomed in Egypt in the second half of the 19th century. So that was really a nice kind of encounter with a person who was indeed happy about what I'd written in the novel, because they knew about Sally and Aldrich, and they'd always wondered what had happened to her, and they found the novel really interesting because of that. So the second thing is, just because it happened that way doesn't mean it'll work in a novel. I mean, if you are trying to write fiction based on true stories, you'll probably already have discovered that. And I guess for me, with the Forest Green in particular, it's very loosely based on the life of my mother's brother. And there are many things in the novel that didn't happen in real life. But there are equally some very dramatic things that happened in real life that don't happen in the novel. And I had to make those tough decisions to change the story in order for the novel to work as a work of fiction. So the novel really moved quite far away from my original starting point with it. I mean, I knew I wanted to write about this uncle of mine, Arthur Lowe, who disappeared for the last 15 years of his life. I wanted to try to write about siblings and how two people's lives can diverge so completely, how one family member can have a kind of ordinary, happy, long marriage and family life, and another sibling can have a kind of disastrous life, a life where nothing really goes right for them. And that was a kind of tension that I was interested in exploring in Forest Green. So yes, just because it happened that way doesn't mean it'll work in your novel. Which leads me to the third point, which is family members may not make good characters. And for me, this was really with Forest Green again, because this is the novel that's based on family history. I could not make my mother work as a character on the page. I originally had thought that the novel would really be tell parallel stories of two lives, and one of which was going to be based on the life of my mother. But I couldn't make her come to life on the page. And the character Peg in the novel is loosely based on my mother, but very loosely. And I just kind of pulled away from trying to depict my mother on the page. And I think partially that's also to do with the fact that my mother had a happy life. And as all writers know, writing about happy people is much less interesting than writing about unhappy people. So, so that kind of had an impact on the outcome of the novel. 4, it can take a long time to get it right. The Mistress of Nothing took me 12 years to write. I had to abandon it several times and write other novels. It took me so long to figure out how to tell the story and how to find Sally and Aldrich's voice. And Forest Green has taken me about 6 years to write, partially because of some of the problems I've just mentioned. Also because writing this book is the first time I've tried to write a book whilst also having a full-time academic role. I'd always had part-time jobs or freelance jobs in the past, but now I've got a full-time academic role. So things got in the way. And then lastly, fiction based on true stories requires as much imagination as any other story. You have to get into the minds of your characters, whether they're based on real people or not. You have to be able to find your way into your character's psychology and understand who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. So I hope my 5 tips are helpful, and thank you for listening.